in a sequence. When Magda read about what happened in Abu Ghraib, she, knowing your experiment before from her studies, had this idea or strange impulse that maybe you are in some way responsible for it. And could you comment why she could have this, in
first moment
thought,
only.
just the first moment, this impulse, of course.
So I have to briefly describe the study because not everybody will know it, right? I mean, I can't just say in the prison.
Zakładamy, że wszyscy go znają.
Chyba lepiej będzie.
No ja już.
No więc powtórzę o tej reakcji swojej na pierwsze zdjęcia z Abu Ghraib.
So the first question was about this reaction of Magda to
Dlaczego ja mogłam tak zareagować? Że uznałam, że Pan jest w pewnym sensie odpowiedzialny za to, co się stało.
This impulse that you might be co-responsible for what happened there.
That's a very provocative question, Magda. In a sense, I would feel better if it was phrased, why did my research not prevent the abuses at Abu Ghraib? And in fact, in one of the recent investigations, the Schlesinger report, in the appendix, they say just that. This is an independent investigation ordered by Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. And they said the Stanford prison study should have forewarned prison officials who set up this prison about the potential power of that situation to corrupt good people. Because my study done in 1971 was really a simple study which said, what happens when you put good people in a bad place? When you put normal, healthy, intelligent college students in a prison-like environment, and you pre-test them to be sure they're normal and healthy. You randomly assign, by a flip of the coin, half to be guards and half to be prisoners, and you put them in this prison-like environment. And what we found is the study was supposed to go for 2 weeks. I had to end it in 6 days because it was out of control. The guards were beginning to physically and verbally and psychologically abuse the prisoners in ways that are very similar to what we see now, 30 years later, in this Iraqi prison. Stripping them naked, putting bags over their heads, sexually humiliating them, doing sexual games on them. And most of it occurred on night shift in my study, exactly as in Abu Ghraib. Most of the terrible things occurred on the night shift. My guards had no training in how to be guards. Those guards, those real military police, had no training in how to be guards. And so there were these eerie parallels, both in the actual images, the physical images that came from my study and came from the pictures out of Abu Ghraib. So that my research should have been a warning that when you give people total power over other people, it's very easy for that power to corrupt them, to make good people do bad things. And that was the message of my study, which said that when you see pathological behavior, like we saw in my study or we saw in Abu Ghraib, do you attribute the pathology to things inside of the people, that sadistic impulses, pathology, distorted personality? That's what we usually use as our explanation. We call it the dispositional explanation. There are dispositions inside of people that make them do this. And in fact, in Abu Ghraib, the military and the administration has said these are a few bad, rotten apples. These are morally corrupt people. These are rogue soldiers, are the words they use. And so that puts the blame on these few people who did these deeds, and they are guilty of them. But what it does is it takes the responsibility out of the situation and the entire military administration system. So the social psychological research I have done, along with my colleagues, and the prison study was just one of 30 years of research I've done, says that situational factors can overwhelm the best and brightest and the most moral of us. Things like if you're in a uniform or not, if you're anonymous or not, if you perceive the responsibility as shared rather than you are responsible, if you have no accountability for your behavior, if you're in an environment where you're under high stress or high fear, all of those distort your judgment and will make you do things that you ordinarily would never do. And that's what we saw in my study, and that's exactly what we see in the Abu Ghraib study. Experiment, not study.
Okej, i z jakiego powodu zdecydował się Pan być ekspertem w sprawie, w procesie przeciwko tym amerykańskim oprawcom, żołnierzom?
And why did you decide to get involved, as we said, in this court process?
So I have become involved in the trial, that is going on in Iraq, in which I'm working with one defendant, but there are a number of military, police, army reservists who are on trial for committing various abuses. And the basic question the trial raises is the question that my experiment and all the research I have done raises: to what extent are individuals responsible for the behavior that they committed, and to what extent can we attribute what they did to the social situational forces and also to something called systemic forces. The situation is what these people experienced in that setting. The systemic forces are all the forces around that situation. In this case, it's the war on terrorism. It's the need to interrogate potential people have information about the insurgency. It's a whole range of things. It's the lack of preparation for the post-war reconstruction. It's the lack of preparation for adequately training the prison guards. So those are things, and it's a failure of leadership, that there was no accountability, no training for any of these soldiers. So I got involved because this is an actual real-world analog of everything I have done in the past 40 years, to say, to what extent do we understand pathological behavior like these terrible abuses that these soldiers committed and are guilty of, by blaming them versus by understanding how they were corrupted by a corrupt prison setting and really by a corrupt immoral war, that evil barrel of prison was put in the evil barrel of war.
I Pana zdaniem, jak sytuacja wokół wojny irackiej przełoży się na samopoczucie społeczne społeczeństwa amerykańskiego, czy samopoczucie obywateli poszczególnych? Jakie to wywoła reakcje?
So what, in your opinion, could be the influence of this Iraqi conflict on condition of society, American society,
Yeah.
of individuals?
Yeah. The Iraqi war is so unfortunate that I am an anti-war activist. I was against the Vietnam War actively. I was against this war before it began. I'm still against the war because it was totally unnecessary. If you read the book by George Bush Sr. and Snowcroft, there's a paragraph that says, why did we not invade Baghdad? Why did we not continue to seek out and destroy Saddam Hussein? And he says, because it would have trapped us, would have trapped America in a prolonged war that you might not have won. It would, I think, and he raises issues about the conflicting religious values. So George Bush's father said, essentially, you should not go to war against Iraq because it's really not an easily winnable war. Unfortunately, his son didn't listen to his father. And the war was really immoral, unnecessary, and really illegal. The head of the UN recently said, he thinks it was a wrong decision. And it was made for all the wrong reasons. See, the war on terrorism is driving all of the political decisions in America. there's no question that global terrorism is a threat. It has been exaggerated by the Bush administration, and I think intentionally. It's exaggerated in the sense that most presidents, most leaders of countries want to calm the fear of the nation. In the middle of the Second World War, President Roosevelt went on the radio and said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." So what we have to do is stop being afraid. We have to be courageous. The current president is saying just the opposite. Be afraid. Terrorists are everywhere. If it doesn't happen now, it's going to happen. In America, we have had 11 alarms that the terrorists are coming. Since October 2001, right after September 11th, until now, there have been 11 alarms, all of which have turned out to be false. Each one, they say, is we have from credible sources that something will be destroyed. And nothing has. None of the alarms have worked, have proven valid. And at no time did the government ever tell the citizens why nothing happened. So that, and we have evidence that when you put these alarms out, you raise the anxiety of the nation. It costs billions of dollars to raise the level of security of all of the police and firemen. And so I have written 2 years ago that there will be no attacks in America. I've written an article in the San Francisco paper because we are doing the terrorist work for them. All of terrorism is about the psychology of fear. A small group of people have random acts of violence against other groups or a nation to produce fear in the population, fear of the unknown, fear of random destruction. They don't want to conquer another nation. They just want to undercut the confidence of citizens in their government to protect them. Well, our government is doing that for them. Our government is making us afraid. Our government is wasting billions of dollars, so the terrorists don't have to attack because we are doing exactly what they would do. If the terrorists attack, it costs us billions of dollars and everybody gets anxious. So I think what the terrorists do is putting out misinformation on the internet, and our intelligence is picking it up and believing the misinformation is real information, and we're acting as if it's a real threat, and we raise the threat level. People get anxious, people get stressed. I call it the pre-traumatic stress syndrome. You're stressed before the stressor, and it costs billions of dollars. But I think this is intentional because they want to maintain a high level of fear of the American people.
Mam wrażenie, że nie lubi Pan administracji Busha. Jeśli dobrze mi się wydaje, to proszę powiedzieć, dlaczego tak jest.
Is Magda's impression that you are not very positive opinion of Bush's administration is correct?
Yeah, I do not have a positive view of Bush's administration because I think they're destroying basic American values. They're destroying the economy. We have an enormous debt when Bush administration took over, there was a $5 trillion surplus. Now we have $5 trillion or billion, I don't even know the numbers, deficit. The trade imbalance has grown enormously. We're paying enormous interest on the debt. Social Security and Medicare are threatened by this. And the government and Bush administration keeps giving tax breaks, giving people money, but it's mostly to the rich people. And the economy has stalled. Republicans are supposed to be good for business. We have the worst economy with unemployment, loss of jobs going to other countries, to India, to China, to Ireland. So they have not been good for business. They're destroying the economy. They're also destroying the environment with anti-environment regulations. They have destroyed the goodwill between America and most nations because of our arrogance of power that we've showed, not only in insisting on going to war in Iraq, but refusing to sign any international treaty, the Kyoto Treaty, the Landmine Treaty, and virtually every other treaty America has refused to sign. Even treaties banning cigarettes, having cigarette ads be more prominent. America has refused to sign, or if we sign, we don't implement them. Or where in the war against AIDS, that on the one hand, we said we're going to give billions of dollars to Africa, but no money can go to any foundation, any group that practices birth control in any form. Well, that means millions of people will die of AIDS because of the religious right. In America, all decisions, administration decisions, I think, are made to support mega business, big business, the religious right, and the Pentagon and defense. Those three institutions really now are controlling America, are influencing the basic decisions that the Bush administration makes. So in order to improve the environment, it always means that some big businesses, it's going to cost them money to reduce emissions, to put in special controls on automobiles. And they simply say, we don't want to do it. Or big businesses want to cut down lots of the forests. Well, the Bush administration has turned back all of the Clinton rules and regulations about not cutting old forests. So it could on and on. And then the Patriot Act, just the name, the Patriot Act is to suppress individual freedom and liberty, which is what America is supposed to be all about, in order for security. Eric Fromm wrote many years ago in the book Escape from Freedom that any nation that surrenders freedom for an illusion of security is a nation that's headed toward dictatorship. His analysis was, why did people support Hitler? Because Hitler said, our national security is threatened, and therefore, in order for me to rebuild the national security, you have to give me some power by surrendering some of your freedom. Once you do that, you don't have a democracy, you have a dictatorship. And that's in part what we're having in America. We keep talking about democracy, and this Patriot Act has a chilling effect on people dissenting against the war, dissenting at all, for fear that they will now be the targets of prosecution.
Ale nie chce pan porównywać Busha z Hitlerem, bo to tak trochę zabrzmiało w pewnym momencie.
But you are far from comparing Bush
and
Hitler.
No, I'm not comparing Bush with, I'm just saying, the Eric Fromm analysis of Hitler makes you sensitive to what are the dangers of ever giving up freedom for security, because security is always an illusion. I studied in Brazil policemen who became torturers for the state. Okay, and how did the state corrupt these ordinary policemen to become torturers and death squad executioners? They said our national security is being threatened by communists. And so your job is to find the communists, get them to confess by any means necessary, including torture or execution, death, to preserve our national security. So every totalitarian nation uses national security as the symbol of why you have to surrender liberty and freedom. And I'm saying that is always a potential danger that anyone who believes in democracy must oppose.
Wobec tego, jak ta wojna może wpłynąć, udział w tej wojnie może wpłynąć na sytuację polskiego społeczeństwa, nastroje społeczne, pana zdaniem, według wiedzy, którą pan ma na temat polskiej sytuacji, polskiego charakteru narodowego, na przykład.
Based on your knowledge and some analysis of Polish national character, if we could say, do you have any opinion how this Iraq conflict and our participation there could influence the condition of our society, of Polish society?
Yeah, I think I think the average Polish person that I've known, and I've had a number of visits, is really very much like the average American person that does not want war. Certainly, Warsaw has been between Moscow and Berlin, all of these years, and does not want war, has not had a militaristic orientation, and I think, as far as I know, that people were reluctant to commit soldiers to Iraq, and now the government has said next year they will pull those soldiers out. It's a great problem because right now the war, I think, in Iraq is being lost. And it would be a great tragedy if America has really destroyed the infrastructure of Iraq with all the bombing. There's very little real reconstruction going on now. It's all a battle, war. If America was to leave, and there are many people in America say bring the troops home, it would be a great a great loss, not only for America, but you know, for, in quote, the West, and in the Allies in a sense, because now you have a total power vacuum. I mean, you know, where you had Saddam Hussein, however evil he was able to keep the different forces together. In the same way in Yugoslavia, Tito was able to keep all the forces together. Once he died, then you had all of these ethnic rivalries, and then you had the slaughter. And I think the same thing will happen in Iraq. That is, Iraq is not ready for democracy. They're going to have the elections. The elections will be spurious. It's not going to represent these very different religious orientations, very different political orientations. And so if all the soldiers pull out, then it will be a disaster. And in fact, what they needed to do was put in more soldiers from the very beginning to secure the stability of the nation, so you could have, so that you could have free elections. They didn't want to do that again. Every decision is political, because American people have recently have started to question the war, and with more than 1,000 soldiers dead, there's more than 6,000 injured, many of them very seriously injured, many having severe mental problems, stress. Americans don't want to send more soldiers in, but unless you send more soldiers in, they can never win the war. They can never secure Iraq. And as each nation, like Poland, pulls soldiers out, they have to be replaced. No other nation wants to do it. No other nation wants to replace, because they realize the war is not winnable. So we're in a very critical time period, not only for Iraq, I think, but for the whole world, that if Iraq goes down, meaning that there is not adequate reconstruction for the average people to say we're living better than we did under Saddam Hussein, that there is some kind of government that can stabilize the country, that can begin to improve the economy, that would be a disaster for the world. That is, Iraq then will be like an anchor, a weight that really pulls the whole Middle East down.
Jak pan myśli, dlaczego tak rzadko mówi się o aspekcie ideologicznym i religijnym tej wojny? Zazwyczaj mówi się o sprawach ekonomicznych bądź zagrożeniu terroryzmem.
Why do you think so rarely this war is being commented upon as economic and anti-terrorist or counter-terrorist operation, and rarely as a religious and ideological conflict?
Well, I think again, it's my personal opinion without much evidence to support. I think the reason America went to war in Iraq was three. Obviously, to secure the oil reserves. There was evidence that Saddam Hussein was making deals with France and Russia for the oil reserves, and that's the third biggest oil reserve in the world. And I think America rushed in before those contracts were finalized, or to undo the contract. So oil was important, but not the most important reason. Also, we realized that we were going to have to move our bases out of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is very volatile. And we realized that we wanted to set up permanent bases in Iraq, because America felt we needed to have military bases and a big embassy in Iraq to help control the whole Middle East. Okay. The third reason is that by going to war, that made President Bush the commander-in-chief. And by going to war, he was able to change his image. Before 9/11, he had the image of being a wimp, of being a fool. He was ridiculed on Saturday Night Live almost every week. And now he transformed in one day because of 9/11. And the image they have crafted of him, his managers, is of decisive resolve. And those are the words he's now using. And I think we went to war, interestingly, with the idea of his handlers that this would help him win the election in 2004. Because they could change his image of being a commander-in-chief, of being strong, having him fly in in a jet, on the aircraft carrier, to say the mission is accomplished, we have won the war. That had a very big psychological impact on America, seeing him as decisive. And in the current electoral campaign, this election campaign, the main thing Bush is saying is Kerry is indecisive, and he is decisive. Kerry doesn't have resolve, he has resolve. And it's all about the war in Iraq. even though we are losing the war, even though, you know, Americans are not real. 1,000 soldiers have died. They're dying every day. There are all these injured soldiers, all these soldiers who are severely stressed. The coalition is falling apart, that the economy is falling apart. So, and Bush's resolve is, he says, he's never made a mistake. He would never do anything differently. Well, that's the wrong resolve. So if you say he is decisive, if you're decisively wrong, that's very bad, rather than decisively right.
Już na koniec, po tylu latach badań, obserwacji różnych społeczeństw i procesów społecznych, czy może Pan powiedzieć, że zmienia się definicja samego społeczeństwa, czyli krótko mówiąc, czy zmienia się społeczeństwo?
After so many years of research experiments, do you think that we need a new definition of society, or society transforms as an organism?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, it's a very hard question to answer. Sadly, as an academic, as an intellectual, I think the research we do has so little impact on society. People don't read it, people don't listen. So for example, with regard to prisons alone, when I finished my study, there were prison riots in America the next day. 3 weeks later, the famous riots in Attica. I gave testimony before the American Congress on ideas I had about how to change prisons. And some of those are in the congressional record, saying the terrible things that happen in prison are because every prison in the world is covered in a veil of secrecy. No one knows what happens in any prison. I'm sure in Poland, if I asked anybody, do you know what's happening in this prison? No, and no, not even politicians, not even the governor, mayor knows what happens in prison. The only time we know is when there's a riot, or when you have the abuses in the pictures at Abu Ghraib. Because no one cares what happens in prisons, because prisons are not open to the media, open to lawyers, open to the Red Cross, transparent. The guards and the warden and superintendent know that there is no real accountability until the extreme. A prisoner gets murdered or something. And so prisoners can be abused, and they are abused often in many prisons throughout the world without punishment of the guards, without punishment of the warden or superintendent where these things take place. So I said prisons have to be open, they have to be transparent, guards have to be well trained, guards have to be accountable, that there are many things that I mentioned then and repeatedly about obvious changes. What happens usually is outsiders almost never change a system. Systems are changed, whether it's prisons, whether it's education. So people who criticize universities almost never have an impact. The change has to come from within, has to come from somebody within who has power. The change almost comes from top down rather than bottom up. So sadly, you know, I'm concerned that psychologists have very little impact, except, interestingly, I think Poland is the unique difference in the whole world. At the Advanced School for Social Psychology here and in Warsaw, and I guess in another city, psychologists are being trained not just to work in universities, but to work for the government, to work in various institutions, to use psychological knowledge to improve the human condition. And I don't know any other country in the world in which many thousands of psychologists are being trained to use their knowledge in the community, in this really exciting applied way. And this is with the start of Professor Janusz Rajkowski and his colleagues in Warsaw, who started this program. And it's a wonderful program, and there's nothing like it in America, nothing like it, I think, in any other country. So that's my hope, that this program will make positive changes in Poland that we can then point to. We, meaning academics, psychologists, can say, look, it's possible for knowledge to change society in a meaningful, positive way. Okay? I love being in Poland. It is the first time I'm here in this town. I've been in Warsaw before. And I come with two bridges. One bridge is the bridge of historical friendship between America and Poland. Part of that friendship is, for me personally, is my wife is Polish. Her name is Maszlak, butter mushroom. And it's just wonderful to be here. In fact, I feel more personal respect here than in America. The second bridge, which is as important, is I bring the bridge of ideas in both of my talks. The first talk will be about the psychology of time perspective, and I hope to present some new ideas for you. And your job is to translate some of those ideas into new ways of advertising and new ways of marketing. The second talk, after our break, is on the psychology of evil. And that is research I have done and others have done that tries to understand how good people do evil things, do bad things. And that is really presenting a different side of human nature. And again, the role of society is how do you prevent good people, ordinary people, from engaging in evil deeds, in abusing other people. So those are my two presentations. The first one will go for about 90 minutes, the second one after the break for 1 hour. So it's very long. And I am aided by wonderful translators. Good. So my talk is applying the psychology of time perspective to improve advertising and marketing.
Right, stop, please. 30 seconds, studio. Keep it quiet, please. Settle down.
For other people, they say, no, time perspective is, the present is a big red circle. It's right now, it's hearing my voice, it's feeling the weight on your chair. It's the things that are happening now. And what just happened when we were seeing the movie about people in the town square talking about time is big, but it's not as big as it. And when you came into the room, that's in the past. But what about next? So for some people, they never think, what's next? Right now, this is important. This is a businessman. When I said, give me a visual image of your sense of time, he said, time is 2 bundles. This is the bundle of my past experience, and this is the bundle of my future expectations. This is the only important one. The past, I learned from my mistakes not to do it again, and I learned from my successes what to keep doing. And I said, is there not a third bundle? He said, no, it's only the past and the future. And I said, what about the present? He said, no, the present is not important. What's important is only these 2. And that is a very sad story because this is the time perspective of many people in business and also many people in the university, because they focus primarily on future goals based on past performance, and they have no time for the present. We'll see why that is bad. Here is a cigarette from Israel, and the name of the cigarette is Time. Sometimes time kills people with cigarettes in many nations. So the question is this a good product name? If they ask you to come up for a name for a new cigarette, is Time a good name? Although this is a very attractive package for me. So let me give you a conceptual model of what I mean by time perspective. Every day you have to make some decision, and on the basis of that decision you're going to take some action. So if you're a student, you have to decide, should I study or should I go with friends to the movie? If you're a hard worker, you have to decide, do I plan my presentation for tomorrow or do I watch the soccer game on television? You have to make a decision. Should I use condom before sex or not? There are 1,000 decisions you make all the time. And the question is, what is the main influence on the decision you make? For some people, did I get sick? Did I lose money? So I will or won't do this now based on the past. And people who tend to make decisions which are heavily influenced by memories of the past, we're going to call those people past-oriented. For other people, they don't think of the immediate situation of the past. They say, if I do this, then what will happen? Will I get arrested? Will I go to jail? Will I get a disease? Will I lose my money? Will I get a raise? Other people who are also living in the present, it's a very different present. It's a present fatalism. They say, it doesn't make sense to try to change anything because my life is controlled by Allah, by God, by the devil, by my teachers if you're a student, by the police, by poverty, by all of these things outside of me. And we'll see that people who are present-oriented, who are hedonistic, are very different than people who are present-oriented and fatalistic. But past or future. There are many, many different reasons. And I will just mention some and then develop a few. We are influenced by the culture we live in. We're influenced by the geography, whether we live in the south or north of a country. Religions encourage people to be more future-oriented than Catholic religion. Social class, poor people in general are present-oriented, either hedonistic or fatalistic. Middle-class people tend to be future-oriented. That's why they move from the lower class to the middle class. Educational level, the more education you get, because the money the next day may be worthless. So in order to be future-oriented, you have to come from a country that is relatively politically stable and economically stable, because to be future-oriented means you have to have trust in the future. We also experience time perspective differently. When you're a child, I will show you, most of us are present-oriented. As we move through life, we tend to become more future-oriented. When we get to the old age, we tend to be past-oriented. And I'll show you why. Different occupations attract people who are more present or future or past. And lastly, altered states of consciousness. Taking drugs puts everyone into a present orientation. The reason for taking drugs is exactly that. You become present hedonistic. You don't think of the future, you don't think of the past, you live in the moment. There were only 2 people at 10 o'clock, 2 Americans. At 10:30, at 10:15, a few people come in. At 10:30, a few people, 11 more. The talk ended at 12 o'clock, and people were still coming in when the talk was almost over. And they didn't come in, because, hello, hola. The culture, especially if you're a business person, to understand how time operates in each of those cultures. My family comes from Sicily. In fact, when I leave here, I'm going to meet new family and a little political movement to divide Italy in half. It's called the League. People in the north are very future-oriented because they are influenced by Germans and Austrians hard. Our money pays the taxes for people in the south who are like children. They don't want to work. They just want to play. They want to eat pasta. They want to have sex. They want to have babies. But really, it's a war of time. It's really future-oriented north versus the present-oriented south. And it's enough so they have a political party. So the question I ask is, what about Poland? Are there time perspective differences, for example, between people from the east of Poland and the west? In some countries, it's north versus south. Nothing you did as an individual made very much difference. It was always the collective, it was always the organization. So there was no sense of working hard for personal goal. And so it's really been very difficult. Of the traditional communist orientation is very different than the time perspective of a more democratic orientation. So this is a wonderful picture. There's a place in Southern California near Los Angeles called Venice Beach. And it's the center of hedonism. People go to lie in the sun all day, to go skating, to lift weights. It's really just pleasure of the body, the physical sensation. And so it's hedonism in the extreme. In Japan, until recently, was a culture that lived in the future, with men working very hard, or in the past. the children of a culture are revolting against their parents to say, you are too future-oriented, you are too past-oriented, we want to enjoy life, to live in the present. Significant change to change your lifestyle. I mentioned Protestants tend to be more future-oriented than Catholics. It all started with Calvin. The Calvinistic tradition said, your success in the world now is an index of the likely chance you have of going to heaven. So it promoted working very hard, promoted a capitalistic orientation, it promoted wanting to be successful so that you knew you would go to heaven. Time is actually money. We have this complicated formula. And here's a bank I used to go to in San Francisco. It's called Time Savings, and here's my little hourglass. Future, because in the future is coming soon. Now, time, we have different, but psychological time is very different. It's the time you construct in your mind. So time flies when you're having fun, quickly. On the other hand,
Kapituła jeszcze miała czas sprawdzić, zliczyć głosy i moja prośba, ogromnie proszę przemyśleć te 3 nominacje, a więc budowanie mostów między różnymi poglądami i aspektami komunikacji rynkowej, budowanie mostów między najnowszą teorią i najskuteczniejszą praktyką i budowanie mostów między polskimi i światowymi standardami marketingu. Myślę, że przy odrobinie chęci zdołacie Państwo tutaj te nominacje przyznać. I jeszcze trzecia informacja. Gdańskie Wydawnictwo Psychologiczne jest po raz kolejny razem z nami, ze swoim stoiskiem, również z nagrodą na dzisiejszej i jutrzej. Mamy również pozycje książkowe profesora Zimbardo z wydawnictwa PWN. To jest Psychologia i życie i kolejna pozycja Nieśmiałość oraz jedna z pozycji wydawnictwa Zysk. I jeszcze chciałabym powiedzieć, że zapraszam 2.
Lovers dreaming, reaching for paradise. But as the shadows
Wiesz, no czasami często mocno skróconych graczy tego środowiska. Wiesz, no...
Actually, it's Warsaw School of Social Psychology.
okay, then we change.
You can change it to be great.
Oh, wait. Okay, yeah.
And here was S, right? Yeah.
Not advanced.
Not advanced.